So I was just asking folks, where are they joining us from? I see one person from Kansas City, Missouri, someone out from the West Coast. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. And we have a few people from Jersey joining us today as well.
Excellent. So happy to
Awesome.
be here.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and start off with introductions. Paige, if you would like to go first.
Sure. So everybody who's here with us today, thank you for being here. Thank you, PSI New Jersey, for this awesome opportunity. My name is Paige Bellenbaum. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I am the founding director of an organization located in New York called the Motherhood Center. And at the Motherhood Center, we provide support and clinical treatment for new and expecting mothers and birthing parents that are experiencing perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, which I know our audience is very familiar with. We treat patients in New York and also New Jersey.
Awesome. Well, welcome. And hi, everyone. My name is Hazel. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the owner of It's Apparently Time practice, where I serve new parents as well as new parent couples. And I am also the social media chair for the PSI New Jersey chapter. And I'm happy to be here to help facilitate this conversation. All right. So we're going to jump into some of the questions that we already have listed. But of course, please, if you have any, put them in the chat and we will try to answer those as well.
Awesome.
All right. So the first question I have for you, Paige, is what are perinatal mood and anxiety disorders?
So perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, which is a really long technical clinical name, so I don't expect anyone who's listening today to remember it. The acronym is PMADS, which we don't love, but it's what we've got. Perhaps a simpler way to say it is maternal mental health, right? So PMADS are what I consider to be an umbrella term for a number of different diagnoses and groupings of symptoms that live underneath, ranging anywhere from, and you'll notice I'm not going to put just postpartum after these terms, because what's important for our listeners to know is that these conditions can strike at any time during pregnancy and up to 1 year postpartum. So it includes perinatal depression, perinatal anxiety, perinatal obsessive compulsive disorder, perinatal post-traumatic stress disorder, and the only diagnosis that receives a postpartum in front of it is postpartum psychosis, because the majority of psychosis cases that happen in the perinatal period happen in the postpartum. So those are the different terms and the different diagnoses that we use through the lens of clinical practice to describe the conditions that 1 in 5 new and expecting mothers experience. Although for myself and others in the field, we typically say 1 in 3, because as you well know, Hazel, about 75 to 80% of all PMAD cases go undiagnosed and undetected and untreated because of the enormous amount of shame and stigma that surrounds maternal mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you pointed out at any point up to a year, because I think there is that misconception that once you go to that 6-week or 8-week post delivery appointment with your OB, that's kind of it. Everything should be good. You should be fine. Everything should be amazing. But that's not actually the case. I'm really glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, it's not the case at all. I mean, I will say that a large percentage of PMAD symptoms, which can include anything from a sense of feeling incredibly overwhelmed, hopeless, helpless, feeling like you made a mistake, wishing you could go back to your old life, having a hard time getting up in the morning, having a hard time making a decision, not finding joy in the things that you used to enjoy, not feeling attached or bonded to your baby, feeling incredibly restless, anxious, like your mind is a hamster wheel, you can't turn it off, you're constantly worrying about things, catastrophizing, jumping to conclusions, feeling like your stomach is in knots, your chest is really tight, perhaps you're having panic attacks, you can't sleep very well even when the baby's sleeping, or you've lost your appetite. The majority of these symptoms, and I just threw a lot out at our listeners, so someone who's experiencing a PMAD does not necessarily possess all of these symptoms, but some of these symptoms. A lot of cases do originate in the first 3 months postpartum, but to your point, Hazel, women can start experiencing symptoms and birthing people at 6 months, 9 months, right? 11 months. Now, we've treated at the Motherhood Center a number of women who have a 2-year-old. And what is heartbreaking about PMADs is that without proper care and intervention and treatment, these symptoms can continue on in perpetuity. And so often we see women who were pregnant with their first, postpartum with their second, were symptomatic, didn't get the treatment that they need and deserve, go on to have a second child, and are still symptomatic, right? With depression and or anxiety or another diagnosis. So there's so much to be said about early intervention, psychoeducation. These are things that can serve as tools for prevention to really nip these symptoms in the bud and help new and expecting mothers and birthing people begin to have the experience that they ultimately want to have in this transition to motherhood.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that parent like a nurse. Nick, you said, I love that you are recognizing those who are officially diagnosed. And what you just said also made me think of like a, I guess you could say, an old adage that I heard my mom say a lot, but prevention is better than cure. And I really feel like that's what organizations like PSI New Jersey, Postpartum Support International, and even your facility, what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to jump ahead of it
Yes.
and help to set moms up to be more successful versus waiting until everything falls apart and then we're trying to go in and help them pick up the pieces.
It's so important, Hazel, and the work that PSI New Jersey does in this area is amazing and powerful and making such a big difference. You know, there's so many different providers that touch new and expecting mothers and birthing people in the perinatal period, right? And, you know, OBGYNs being a really critical component of care, pediatricians being a very important component of care in the postpartum period. But doulas, lactation consultants, we have all of these experts that surround a new or expecting birthing person as they go through this process. And if we all play our part, right? And if we all are able to, from the very beginning, if I had a magic wand, we would be talking to women and birthing people in the preconception phase about mental health and maternal mental health in general. But if we're asking those questions, right, that get to the heart of risk factors, do you have a history of mental illness, depression, anxiety, in particular bipolar disorder? Are you currently on medication? If you are planning on staying on medication, or even if you're not, you should meet with a reproductive psychiatrist to assess what meds are safe and effective for you to take during pregnancy. Because, alert, there are many safe and effective medications to take during pregnancy and into the postpartum while breastfeeding. And really starting to arm not only women and birthing people with the signs and symptoms, but their partners. It's so important for partners to recognize the signs and symptoms and know what PMADs are. You know, our logo is a life preserver. And when I had my own experience with severe depression and anxiety after my son was born, I felt like I was drowning in a never-ending ocean, just paddling as fast as I could to keep my head above water. And it's crazy how many women use the water to describe what it's like to be drowning in depression and anxiety in the perinatal period. But all I wanted was for someone to throw me a life preserver and pull me out onto the shore so that I could breathe and just kind of take inventory of what is going on. But when you're that mom who's drowning, you can't be your own life preserver. And it's why partners can play such a critical role. They can be that life preserver. They can recognize the signs and symptoms. They can help their partner pick up the phone and make the calls. Like, nobody who has an infant who's struggling with depression or anxiety is in a place to start calling around to try to figure out what providers accept their insurance, right? And this is where that concept of the village comes in, which we're so distanced from, sadly, in contemporary society. But we all need to surround the new and expecting mother and birthing person, and all play our part because we all play a role.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so what would you say is the difference between baby blues and what are the risk factors for developing postpartum depression?
So the baby blues is a very distinct experience that about 80% of all new mothers go through, right? It's that common. After the birth of a baby, our hormones, estrogen and progesterone levels are doing Olympic gymnastics, right? And the levels drop significantly, thus creating an emotional reaction for a new mom. So in concert with total sleep deprivation, an enormous sense of overwhelm, oftentimes the inability to really even make sense of one's birth experience, hormones are contributing to a sense of anxiety, a sense of sadness, crying sometimes, or a lot of the time out of nowhere, feeling irritable, feeling overwhelmed. And these symptoms, the way that we really delineate between baby blues and perhaps a PMAD, is that these symptoms can last anywhere for a few days in the immediate postpartum up to 2. Or if they intensify, then there might be a PMAD at play. So again, super common. Having baby blues doesn't necessarily mean that someone has postpartum depression or is going to develop it. And the second part of that question was risk factor. Was that what it was, Hazel? Okay.
Yeah, risk factors for developing postpartum depression.
Yeah. I mean, risk factors for developing any perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, including postpartum depression, is a history of mental illness. And this is one of those things that the medical village could enhance, is really having a conversation with a soon to be pregnant, currently pregnant woman or birthing person. What's your mental health history? Do you have a history of any of these different mental illnesses? I want you to know that you are at a greater risk of developing a PMAD. So let's start putting together your maternal mental health plan now, right? So a history of mental illness, any kind of, social economic stressors, right? It could be financial, it could be partner, issues in one's relationship. The pandemic had an enormous impact on women who are pregnant and postpartum. Having a unplanned or unwanted pregnancy, having a traumatic birth or a NICU experience. These are all some of the risk factors that can increase someone's likelihood of developing a PMAD, in particular postpartum depression. The other one is having had a PMAD previously. Women who have experienced postpartum depression or another PMAD with a previous pregnancy or postpartum are at a 50 to 75% greater risk of developing a subsequent PMAD.
Yeah. Very helpful information, especially knowing the difference between what you can normally expect once you give birth to a baby and then when it crosses over into we need to get you some support immediately. I personally am along the vein that every single mom needs support, even if they, don't have a history of mental health illness, because it is such a hard transition. I know for me as a only child, I didn't really have to grow up considering my sibling or their feelings of what they wanted. And then I had my first child 7 years ago, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you were completely dependent on me. I just need a break, but I can't get one, right?
So true.
Yeah.
So true. The transition to motherhood, what we kind of eat, sleep, and breathe at the Motherhood Center is this concept of both and we say it a million times a day, is that motherhood can be wonderful, beautiful, amazing, life-changing, and at the same time, it can be the hardest thing we've ever done. We can feel like we wish we'd never done it. We can want our old life back. We can feel like we don't even like our baby sometimes, or a lot of the time, right? The analogy that I use is you can look at your baby and think he or she is the cutest thing you've ever seen and feel like you made the biggest mistake of your life on the same breath that really, to me, is the true definition of motherhood. It's the both and.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, right? Like, this is where it gets tricky. I feel like when we're expecting, no matter how much we read or how much people might tell us, oh, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, it's very hard to take that in. It's
Mm-hmm.
when we're actually there and realize what it's like to have this, what feels like and is the biggest responsibility of our lives. And just the enormity of what it means to be a mother,
Yeah.
right? It's huge.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier about partners playing a significant role in supporting birthing individuals when they transition into motherhood. So, can you speak a little bit more to what they should be looking for? What are some key indicators that should let them know I need to get my partner help?
Yeah, there's not a lot of literature or research that focuses on partners in PMADS. Although there is one book that I always strongly recommend to partners, I feel like it should be mandatory reading. So while expecting moms and birthing people are reading all the birthing books, and partners should be reading The Postpartum Husband. I don't love that it's called Husband. It should be called The Postpartum Partner. It was written back in the 90s by one of our, foremothers of PMADS, Karen Kleiman. It's a wonderful book, and the reason why I like it so much is that it's short, it's compact, it's what to look for, what to do in bullets. So it's very easy to digest, but it's a wonderful tool to introduce partners to what the signs and symptoms of postpartum depression are. So I think, for partners to be truly helpful and effective and supportive, it's very important for them to recognize the signs and symptoms. What does postpartum depression and anxiety look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if my partner is crying a lot of the time, all of the time, if she appears to be incredibly overwhelmed, if she is having a really hard time being around the baby, doesn't want to have anything to do with the baby, wants and needs me to do almost everything when it comes to caring for the baby. Just doesn't seem like herself at all, right? Isn't able to sleep, isn't able to eat, is constantly worried about things. And, perinatal anxiety is like whack-a-mole. It will go from one fixation to another. These are some of the things that partners need to keep their eye out for. And the thing that's so important that I think both women and partners alike can find themselves in the space of, oh, if I just white knuckle it, it'll go away, right? I just need to wait. This is hard. I know it's hard. I'm just going to kind of hold my breath and push forward. And like in some instances that happens, but in a lot of other instances, it doesn't go away on its own. So if partners see any of this, they can be so supportive by saying, look, I know this is hard. I see that you're struggling. I can't imagine how incredibly difficult it is to become a mother. I really want to support you. I want to make sure that you get the care and help that I know is going to help you enjoy this more. And feel better about yourself. And so, look, this is a super common thing. It happens to so many new and expecting moms. Let's look into it and let's figure out how we might be able to help you feel better.
Right.
Sometimes just those simple words can make all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we jump into talking about resources and how to access the support that's available, does anyone who is watching have any questions that they would like Paige to answer? If you can drop it in the chat, I'll give you all a few minutes to do so. And welcome to those of you who are joining. We have Paige from the Motherhood Center, and I'm Hazel, the social media chair for PSI New Jersey chapter. And if you have any questions related to PMADS, what to look for, signs and symptoms, how to access support, if you have any questions, if you would like to drop it in the chat before we go into talking about the resources that are available. All right. Doesn't look like anyone has any questions. I try to give people a little bit because I know sometimes when you're trying to type real fast, the autocorrect messes up what you're trying to say.
Oh, yes, I know that
Yeah.
how.
All right, well, why don't we jump into talking about resources? So, what steps can one take to support a friend, a loved one who may be experiencing perinatal mood and anxiety disorders? And how can you encourage them to reach out for help?
Well, we are very lucky in this country to have one of the greatest maternal mental health organizations and networks, probably of any country. And it's actually international, and that's Postpartum Support International, which Hazel, you are a chapter of in New Jersey and a thriving chapter. You know, PSI is such a wonderful resource that originated in the 80s, and they have just grown exponentially and offer everything from a warm line to a hotline for new and expecting mothers that are struggling or their partners. They offer all kinds of resources, psychoeducation. They have support groups for all kinds of different demographics of new and expecting mothers and birthing people. They have trainings for clinicians, just a wonderful resource. Most importantly, they have a network of providers. And so wherever you are in the US, you can go to PSI, zone in on your location, and figure out what therapists, MDs, and other specialists in the perinatal period are near you. So first and foremost, always refer people to Postpartum Support International. You know, there's also a real growing focus on maternal mental health and maternal mental illness in different cities and states across the US. Sometimes there are more localized resource pools. Here in New York, we have Postpartum Resource Center in New York, which is a wonderful resource for women here. It's a even more granular collection of providers that focus in this area. So, you know, I think, and then look, if you're in New York or New Jersey, please consider the Motherhood Center. We're here for you. We, as I mentioned, our specialty is providing support and clinical care to new and expecting mothers that are struggling from PMATs. We offer everything from support groups, and we also have outpatient therapy with perinatal therapists and reproductive psychiatrists. For those of you who might not know what that is, this is a very specific area of psychiatry that focuses explicitly on medication that's safe and effective to take during pregnancy and postpartum. So there's not a ton of repro psychs, that's how we refer to them in the US, but we have some of the best in New York City at the Motherhood Center. And the last thing, Hazel, that we offer that doesn't really exist anywhere else is our day program. And this is a program that meets 5 days a week, 5 hours a day, for perinatal people that are having a really hard time caring for themselves and or their baby. So they participate in groups, they have an individual treatment team, we have an on-site nursery, we have expressive therapies, so we do art, yoga, meditation, mindfulness. We have family support, we have a partners group. It's really a amazing intervention that helps women feel much better, much faster. So those are some of the resources. I'm sure you all have a lot more that are particularly in New Jersey. And just want to say to everyone, keep your eyes out because we're really hoping to have more of a presence in New Jersey too in the next year or so.
Awesome.
More to come on that.
Well, we are excited to learn more about that. And please let us know, and we will help to share the information with those who follow us and announce it at our education and training groups. We actually host the series is starting back. We started down because everyone gets busy in the summertime, but next week we have another training, so I will include that information in the caption at the end of our live so that those of you who are interested and would like to register, you can do so by clicking the link in our bio. But I'll include the date, the topic, and all that information for you after this live is over. Paige, any last words or takeaways that you want to provide to the listeners as it relates to this topic?
Yeah, I want to say the most important thing about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders is that they are totally 100% treatable. With the right care, everyone can feel better and have the experience of becoming a mother, a parent, as they had hoped. And I want to just leave on this note of hope. There are incredibly efficacious interventions out there, and everybody who gets the care and support they need feels better.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paige, for joining me today. And for those of you who are here and got to join in, please share with your friends, with your coworkers, share to your story this live so that they can come back and watch the replay and learn about all of the amazing information that Paige shared with us and also all the amazing things that they're doing at the Motherhood Center and that we're doing here at PSI New Jersey. All right,
Thank
have a
you
good
so much,
one.
April. Thanks, and thanks
Yes.
everyone for being here.
Bye.
Bye.
Where you can find support. And I'm going to invite to you. Thank you for joining us. And we have a few people from Jersey joining us today as well.
Excellent. So happy to be
Awesome.
here.